All right. What I want to talk about today is the perspective of a hierarchy. We'll say from your perspective, from the third person perspective, and then how this all holds together and why understanding hierarchy is so confusing. Of course, I already have a video on hierarchy, but this is more about the perspective change and how it influences how you think about the world. Okay, what do I mean by perspective change? Well, I sort of pointed this out with my midwit meme video. You can of course see that here. I'll put a little card up. That video contains sort of the key to the PSYOP, this third person perspective problem. And we're running into that everywhere. People are explaining to you how the world you're embedded in works by showing you a view that you don't have and can't have, which is a view outside of that world because you're actually embedded in the world. And this really causes an issue with hierarchy, which, again, I've already talked about that here, because we don't understand the nature of hierarchy in terms of what that looks like for us. So when we think about hierarchy, when we talk about hierarchy, a lot of times what we're thinking about is something like an organizational chart. And so you've got the organizational chart, and you can see there's usually like one thing at the top, and then there's like 4 or 5 things beneath that, and then there's more things beneath that, and there's all these lines that denote, where the reporting structure is. And then we see ourselves inside that because we're told this is where you are, this is where you report to, right? And this is how it works. Now, I don't know how many times in my 35 plus year career with all kinds of companies in all kinds of industries that I heard dotted line reporting because it doesn't follow the org chart. But I'm pretty sure it was every single company I ever went anywhere near. That should tell you something. These are idealistic standards that are not necessarily realistic, and they're not necessarily being followed. So that's the first thing, right? Like, this is what we want things to look like. How do things actually look? The second thing is that things like org charts and charts of the hierarchy do not give you a lot of information as to how the hierarchy works. So most companies have an HR department. If you have a problem with your manager, you can go to HR. If you have a problem with your coworker, you can go to your manager or HR. In fact, you should go to your manager first and HR second, generally speaking. How do I know that? That's not on the org chart. Ah, right. So you generally report to different people for different things. Now, my jobs were always in between jobs. So I usually worked between the IT department, is what it used to be called, and the software development team. And so that didn't have a name. I kind of gave it a name. I called myself the IT liaison because if you add French to any name, it makes it sound better. Nowadays, we call that DevOps, which is probably the most accurate name in computing of all time, even though we've ruined it. It's the thing between development and operations. Operations guys keep the computers running day by day, right? The infrastructure, and development are the guys that make the software. Fair enough. So that interaction is not plottable on a typical org chart because you're not reporting to either group, right? If you have an infrastructure thing, you go up the IT avenues and talk to the IT manager. If you have a development thing, you go to the development stack, right? And so I was always in between these things. So that's how I know they don't work. That is a matter of scale and detail. In other words, how the thing looks from outside is not the same as how it looks from inside. And it matters how granular or what detail level you're looking. Jordan Peterson talks about this in terms of layers of analysis, but actually it's scale and detail is the better way to think about it. So what does this look like to a person that's sort of embedded in it? Well, the first, obviously the org chart's flat. It's 2-dimensional. It's not really representative of anything. Some of what I just described can be explained by adding depth to the org chart. What happens if you add depth to this whole picture? What does this start to look like? Well, it looks like a pyramid. It's a 3-dimensional sort of thing. It's got 4 sides, probably. Maybe it has 3. It doesn't really matter. But for the purposes of this animation, it looks like a pyramid. That's what all hierarchy looks like. And of course, there's a pyramid of people. They unfold over time, and there's one at the top. And as you go down, there's just more people involved, and that's okay. But this doesn't give you a sense for what's really going on, because where are you? You're not here. You're not outside of these things. You're embedded in many, many hierarchies, and you're at a different place maybe in most of the hierarchies. You're not at the bottom of every hierarchy, and you're probably not at the top of any hierarchies, because tops of hierarchies are rare. There's usually only one person there. So what does this look like? How can we sort of zoom in, we'll say, and see what this looks like from the perspective of somebody who's deeply embedded inside one of these hierarchies? Because that's more the question that you need answered, is how does this look to me? And as we zoom around, we can kind of see how it looks, right? And then like our view is so limited from inside the pyramid, inside the hierarchy. Now, obviously, I've already given you an idealized three-dimensional version in this pyramid, and it's not that straightforward. But when we start to look around from our position, we'll say in the middle, because we're roughly in the middle in this, just to show you how confusing it is. The people in the middle have the hardest time. If you're near the edge, you're more likely to understand where you are in the hierarchy, at least on one dimension, maybe two. That's kind of important. So people on the margins know the hierarchy better than people who are not on the margins. They don't know the hierarchy very well at all. And so because looking around is very constrained, and what you see below you is, again, more expansive, and then what you see when you're looking, we'll say, across or horizontally across, is much more limited. You kind of think you're higher up. Now, this is an exact center, basically, of this pyramid, but it looks like you're much higher up than you are, just as in the midwit meme. And the other thing that you'll note is that as you look up, you just see the feet. You don't see much else. You see feet. And so that's good to know. Like, you're only seeing a flat bottom view of what's higher than you. So your view in and of itself is flat. The view in and of itself is limited and constrained to your cognition. It's not constrained by anything else. It's constrained by your cognition. And your cognition is limited. Now, you may have greater or lesser cognition than other people. In fact, I guarantee you that you do on both sides. Right? Greater than some, less than others, right? That might have something to do with where you are in the hierarchy, by the way. And if you meet this sort of flat view at the top, they look stupid because they look two-dimensional. I mean that technically. Can't see all of them. You can't see all of any single character above you, but you can see a lot more of all the characters below you. So you feel like, well, they're easy to understand, but the people above you are not. And the people beside you just talk like you anyway, so it doesn't really matter, right? What does this mean? It means it gives us a very warped view of the world. People near the margins understand and respect and play along with the hierarchy. And that's why, basically, you've heard this, the dumber people get along better. Yeah, that's why. That's why the people lower down in the hierarchy, the people at the margins, at the edges, actually, for the most part, they're more comfortable with the hierarchy because they can see where they are better. And the people that are stuck in the middle, and we put a lot of people in the middle, maybe that was a bad idea, they get confused. And they see the people up top as dumb. But just as with releasing the Epstein files, there's a reason for that. And the reason is you don't understand how the law works, but you think you do. And if you did understand how the law works, you'd realize why they can't necessarily do that. It won't have the effect you think. And these things are complicated. The people above you get away with breaking laws because they're better at understanding the law than you are. Not because they have more money necessarily, although those two things correlate, and that's confusing to us. So I understand why it would be confusing, and hopefully this animation helps you to see what's confusing about it and why it matters. So I want you to think about the fact that people are telling you from this third-person perspective, which is really just objective material reality, which doesn't exist, by the way, that this is how it looks from the outside. There's no one's outside of it. No one. Which means no one knows how it looks from the outside. They're just speculating. And of course, when they speculate about something more complicated, or complex than they are, you come up with an org chart, a flat representation. And sure, you can upgrade the org chart to the pyramid. I did. But ultimately, that isn't how it looks because, again, there's all this dotted line reporting, even on an org chart that's already inaccurate. And you don't fix that problem by adding the third dimension to it, right? Or adding more details to it, because the more details you add, the harder it is to keep track of. And so the purpose of an org chart is so it's easy to track, so that basically the people on the margins can participate easily without having to stress themselves out and save their cognition for the job at hand, and not for trying to understand the ins and outs of how things work. And that side effect, the way that operates, explains a lot of what you see in the world. Whether you realize it, we'll say right now, or not, it explains a bunch of the world to you, for you. So that's actually really important to know. So hopefully this little animation, which I know took forever for me to build for various reasons, and AI is a sneaky thing, and I had failing equipment that I didn't really understand, so I lost about, I don't know, 6 of these, but it's here now. So contemplate it, replay it, kind of, give some thought as to you're stuck in the middle of these hierarchies, multiples of them, and your view is limited. And you need to have some appreciation for that and some understanding about that, so you don't get ahead of yourself and sort of call for the destruction of things that you're not understanding, even though they're actually good. It's just that you don't see it because all you're seeing is this flat representation. Look, I hope this helped. I want to thank Ethan. He's the one that sort of inspired this particular animation, although quite by accident, because he didn't like this idea at all. But I think he figured it out. So I'm sure that if this was helpful to him, he'll let me know. And I hope that you'll do the same. Comment, like, subscribe, all of that stuff, so that we can sort of grow the channel here. And look, I just want to thank you for your time and attention.